But you don't think that the wolves came in later? In other words, the
No,
wolves were
wolves
around.
are wolves. Men are men, honey. Since the beginning of time, the Egyptians, wolves are wolves. Men are just men. They love beautiful women. You can't blame them.
So you think it's a lot of baloney, right? That was so much better for the women in the 40s. In other words, the wolves were always around from the
The
beginning.
wolves will always be around. They love beautiful women. Why not? And if the women are willing to sell their wares to get what they want, it's up to them. It's been that way since the days of the Egyptians.
How about Crawford? Did you have any dealings with Joan Crawford?
I never worked with her. I knew her socially. She was a very tough lady, great actress, but I tangled with her only once over a boyfriend that I had. And he became enamored of her, and she bought him some suits or something, and I was shocked that he took them. In fact, I didn't go out with him anymore after that. But she knocked herself out, trying to get him, and she did for a while, and then he dumped her and tried to come back to me, and I said, oh, no, that's not right for me, no way. But you couldn't help to admire her because she was a great actress. She had great style. She knew how to handle men. She was one of my favorites on the screen. I never missed a Joan Crawford movie. So naturally, when this happened, I was so heartbroken because I never knew she could be so vicious. But then later on in life, I met her again in a big nightclub. And I was dancing with Dan Daly, as a matter of fact. We were out on a date, and we were dancing. And she called me and said, Ann, come over to me. I want to talk to you. She said, if they ever do my life story, I would want you to do it. She said, you're so much like me. You have such a love of life. You love to dance. You like to have fun. And she said, I think you could do it. And I thought that was a very great compliment. And then I wasn't mad at her anymore. Of course, I never got to do it, but it would have been great fun.
Did you think that from what you saw that people like Joan Crawford, Betty Davis, there's a great story Roddy quoted. He said when Joan Crawford was on the set of The Women with Norma Shearer, she said, "What am I going to do? She's already got the producer. How am I going to steal this movie?
With the boss,
she's sleeping with the boss, and I can't see it." But the idea of these great, almost like the Norma Desmond women, who Koch remembers as a young guy, that they were really makeup creations. Crawford, much more than like the Junie Allisons who came in.
Yes, who were very natural.
And that they were so into, it was like their life was being a star. It wasn't just being a performer and having
That's right.
Star.
That was their whole existence, is that camera and getting a good story and acting and performing in it. That was their whole, they were like in a cocoon. That's all she wanted. And her personal life really was not that dramatic. I know she went with Greg Boutzer for a while, who was a big attorney. She was mad for him, and that didn't work out. But she had her heartaches in her personal life.
A very different person from Janet Leigh. I mean, I said to Jamie, I said, things could have been worse. You could be Christina Crawford,
Oh. But then, you see, Christina Crawford should never have written that book.
No, never.
You see, after somebody is dead and gone, that's really, to me, that's kind of dirty pool. Even though it happened to her, I'm sure everything in it was true. But still, I didn't admire her for doing that. I think between people like Joan Crawford and Bette Davis, who really literally ruled Hollywood, yes, they would be tremendous professional jealousy between them. But I never, for instance, here's Greer Garson. She wasn't like that. She was a pussycat. She was one of the, and Irene Dunn was a pussycat. These were beautiful, easygoing ladies. Oh, I'm sure they had claws, and when somebody did them wrong, but they never acted like that.
Well, but even Jean Arthur.
Jean Arthur wasn't like that. She was a wonderful gal. I mean, she These ladies were all smart. They knew what they wanted, and they wouldn't settle for anything less. But they didn't go out of their way to be mean or bitchy.